The police killing of Minneapolis resident George Floyd has sparked a global response on the killings of black bodies in the United States. Ark Republic has been covering all of the protests, demonstrations, and rallies that have started in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and have expanded around the world. What we wanted to do is we wanted to now give voice to those who are on the front lines, the protesters. And so we have created a roundtable, 3 discussions in which we will hear from the protesters why they demonstrate, what do they want, and what do they see as real change. In Roundtable 3, protesters detail their on-the-ground experiences, from peaceful marches to police kneeling, and even white disruptors reported across the country attempting to create chaos and confusion. It is clear that the discussants want freedom, but the next step is for them to talk through and talk about what does freedom and justice look like.
My name is Karina Atkinson. I'm from Goldsboro, North Carolina, born and raised. I am a motivational speaker, spoken word artist, poet, as well as an activist and advocate.
So my name is Jessica Manrriquez, and I am a museum educator. Well, I am an educator at a museum here in the Mississippi Delta, and I'm based in Cleveland, Mississippi.
My name is Mikel Arrindell. I'm currently in Boston, Massachusetts. I am a substance abuse therapist and a member of Alpha Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! When do we want justice? When do we want it? Now!
Well, I appreciate Ark Republic doing this because even though I'm a journalist, I went to Seton Hall University for journalism. 1,000 years ago, you weren't born. I graduated in 1986. I am very disappointed in the journalism we have today, which I feel we don't have any journalism today. And I'm more disappointed with the small percentage of Black led platforms. So I'm glad that Ark Republic is on top of this, because these people don't give us a chance to have the platforms more Black media. So I thank you for putting this together. And I'm glad we're having a George Floyd protest roundtable. I guess it's kind of like a sort of kind of post, because there's still some protests and rallies happening, but it's sort of kind of post the indictments of the police officers. So I wanted to kind of double back a little bit and talk about initially, where were you when you heard about the George Floyd incident? Were you watching live when it happened? Did you see the video later on? Have you seen the video? Some people didn't watch the video because it's too triggering. So why don't we all just kind of jump in and let's talk about that first, and then get to what inspired you to obviously participate in these protests and what happened there. So let's start with that. Anybody can just jump in.
Well, as for me, I remembered I was home and I was on Facebook and just going through my news feed, and I saw people were talking about this video and, oh my gosh, here we go again. And I was like, oh Lord, what is going on? And there was a couple of times I scrolled past the video, not knowing that that was what people were referring to, but there was a point where I wasn't sure I wanted to stop and see it. Mm-hmm. And then as kind of the buzz continued, I said, you know what, let's see what happened. So I clicked on it and I watched it for only a few seconds. And I was like, what did I just watch? Mm-hmm. And so after some time, I returned to finish it. And the feelings of frustration were immediate. Just because my observation, just thinking back, most videos are, hard to see. You got to rewind it. You got to analyze it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of going on, multiple cops and wrestling someone down, or hard to see, hard to make out. The videos constantly in review. But it was probably the most clearest, most blatant display I have seen, if ever, in a long time. So that was my thoughts, and that's where I was when I was taking that in.
Wow. Anybody else want to share what they felt or where they were when they first saw the video? Did you see it at all, or you can't watch?
I was actually, unfortunately, I had to find out on social media. I wish we would have saw it in the news a lot earlier. But I haven't watched the complete video. I've watched a couple seconds and didn't want to see the rest of it. I didn't want to be triggered that much because I kind of knew where it would take me. And unfortunately, it's almost like we've become numb to it. So we've seen so many, so it's just like, okay, here we go again. But it's just the same level of frustration that it would have been for the other videos before in Georgia and wherever. So, yeah, that's for me.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've only seen the still image, like the photograph, but I haven't seen the video at all, and I'm very like aware of how traumatic that can be. So I've not shared it or anything like that on Facebook. Just out of respect to my friends.
Yeah, I never shared the video. I tried not to watch the video, but I'm in media, so I have to watch the video because I have to talk about it on platforms. And I'm pretty, like, you know, not that everybody from Newark is tough, because I'm from Newark and I can't fight, so there you go. But tough in the sense that you live in an environment where you see a lot, so you kind of like are desensitized, like Mikel said. So even though I have seen many, you know, Eric Garners and Trayvon Martins and Philando Castiles and Sandra Bland's and, you know, and the list goes on. The thing that got me about watching this video, of all things, was when he called for his mother. His mother's been dead for 2 years. So I know that by the time he got to that point, I'm sure he knew his mother was dead for 2 years. But by the time he got to that point, I knew he was dying because he was delirious. You cannot be calling for your mother who passed away 2 years ago and you knew that she did. And 2 years later, you're asking for your mother as if she's there, because I guess when you're delirious, your brain does whatever. He wasn't getting oxygen to the brain. He was dying. And that specifically is what is etched in my mind. And I got physically ill. I got physically ill. Not that we shouldn't have gotten physically ill before, but it was just like the way this man killed him. You saw him looking right at the camera. The young lady was shooting the camera. He was looking at the camera. His knee was on his neck. His hand was in his pocket. And he was like, yeah, tough guy, right? He actually knew he was killing him and looked at the camera as if, and what? And I'm still doing it. So that kind of thing has to be, I don't know. So obviously protests erupted, not just there in Minnesota, but around the nation. I mean, London, everywhere. But locally here in the States, it was just a groundswell. So was that what inspired, and we can just have a dialogue, we don't have to wait for all my questions, but was that what inspired you guys to protest? Because like we had a succession of things even before that. You know, we had, you know, Kristen Cooper in the park with the, you know, Amy Cooper lying on him saying he was trying to attack her. We had the young man in the park that was jogging and got shot and murdered in Georgia. You know, we had Breonna Taylor being shot in her home while sleeping, and the boyfriend got arrested for protecting her when they just kicked in the door and didn't identify themselves. I mean, there was a succession of things that happened along the way. So was this just the last straw for you guys, or this was just something special and you decided, I'm going to get involved, I'm going to participate, I'm going to now do what I can? For those of you who did, you know, go out there and you on the front lines of protesting and rallying.
I attended the Raleigh protest this past Sunday. And on this past Tuesday, I participated in my hometown's protest in Goldsboro, North Carolina. And there have been protests that have transpired since then. Just last night, we had a vigil on behalf of George Floyd and the current discussions that surround society right now. And we were fortunate enough to be graced with the presence of George Floyd's aunt. So I was able to meet her, and that was some very great discussions were made. And I, as well as a few other people, took the initiative to, while in those settings, get people registered to vote. This time ended up being different for me, more so because of the responses around me. I'm usually always, speaking up and speaking out and fired up and trying to figure out, different things that can be done to help bring change. But this time, the people who were also fired up were more in close proximity. Goldsboro, we have community roundtables and meetings, and we have initiatives, but it swelled this time. So it felt good for the first time to participate in a protest and a march in my city. So that's kind of the experience that I had with seeing a new wave of young people come to the forefront, because me being continuously in the community, you kind of start to see the same community faces.
Of course, we say the usual suspects.
Yeah. And I always encourage others to, get started and getting involved, but we kind of all got used to knowing who to call on. So to see these new faces that just got this fire under their feet and who haven't stopped, that's really what made it different for me, was the wind behind me and the changes around me that, really came close to home with my community.
So so when you started to get involved, what did you see? Tell us what happened there. Police officers, were there, was it, as they say, peaceful? Like what? Give us, an idea of, kind of take us back there, if you will.
For Raleigh, it was a large crowd, but it was very peaceful. It was very, the vibe and the energy was very positive. People were really proactive, and I feel like, I didn't even hear negative comments from people who were just watching. The whole aesthetic was great. Unfortunately, I experienced the police throwing tear gas at us during a peaceful moment. And, it was very nostalgic. I remembered walking, and we got to the point where we were in traffic. So we're walking in between cars at this point. But no one's honking because they're upset. Their windows are rolled down. Everybody's chanting and clapping from their cars as we're stopping traffic. Some guy's carrying a stereo playing Nipsey Hussle. So everybody was like, and then all of a sudden this nostalgic celebratory moment stops when people are like, run. So I start running. Didn't know why I ran at the time, but unfortunately I injured my ankle. So that has been an issue that I encountered. But little old me, of course, I sat down on the curb, rubbed my ankle a little bit, took my boot off, and walked for 2 more hours. Kind of probably made it a little worse. But I found out later that it was because tear gas had been thrown. And so it kind of really made me think, wow, like, you really, what you go in knowing to expect, because it didn't rattle me at all, but it kind of, at the same time, you don't expect it. And fortunately, we left right before things got real. And when I say real, as we were leaving, we witnessed a police car drive through the crowd. I don't know if anyone was hit, but I think there was a little bit of agitation going on. And those images that I used to only see on TV, when the cops come in with the all black and the shields to form a barrier, never saw that in person. And that was starting as we were leaving, and the vans get mobile. I saw, cops walking with their batons to meet the group. So that's when it took a turn. So what you saw on the news during that late night over the weekend in Raleigh and the riot starting, that happened after we left. So for those who may have been misinformed, it was a very peaceful protest as far as Raleigh is concerned during those earlier parts of the day, and there were no issues until the cops aggressively intervened.
Oh, man.
And for Goldsboro, to further answer your question, peaceful. 100% peaceful, 100%. It was a smaller, more intimate crowd versus Raleigh being a larger city. So we had moments to actually stop and reflect, and some shared poetry. So it was a very more intimate setting that really brought about a healing atmosphere. So that was my experience for both.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I can go. I wasn't able to be on the front lines, like in Memphis or Little Rock or any of the cities that are near here, just because I have mobility issues. And when I heard about a local preacher wanting to organize a rally here in my hometown of Cleveland, I jumped at it. Like, I was like, yeah, let's do this. And one of my friends has a bunch of youth that he works with, and they were wanting to march, but like, they wanted to march in a very radical way, like chanting about Black love and queer love. And so we supported them, and that's what the march at the rally at Cleveland looked like. It was kind of two different ones, but they joined together once we got downtown. So, like, my experience here in Cleveland was very similar to Karina's experience in Goldsboro, was it? But it was very intimate. We have a really small town here, and a lot of people came out. There had to have been at least 150 folks out there, and it was peaceful. But once white folks found out that there was going to be a protest here, they fear-mongered us into having a very large police presence, and I'm talking like county cops, of course local PD, like the sheriff's department. Like, there were a lot of cops present, just because people started freaking out and started being worried, and like, I laughed, but it really it got to my mom, and she told me not to go, but of course I'm going to go support the youth that wanted to go. And it was fairly peaceful. It was completely peaceful, because that's all the preacher had planned, was to just hold space and kind of grieve and celebrate each other. But the protest itself wasn't, I wouldn't consider it a protest. It was more like a rally. Of all the folks that spoke, like, the majority of them were preachers. And so it was like we were having church outside. But then when they got the chance, our youth did get to speak and did get to represent their more radical beliefs. And I think at that point, we had achieved something a little more than what it originally had set out to be, because the guy organizing it, he was very much pro-cop. He was very much pro letting the cops protest, and, well, not protest, but join in. They did a kneeling moment of silence, and he invited the cops to join in on that. And our young folks were very aware of how wrong that was, and how not helpful that is in the long run.
So why wasn't it helpful in the long run? If we want the police to be our allies, what was problematic about that to you guys or the young folks there? I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is, oh, okay, that's not bad. What was the problem?
Yeah, I feel like most people would think that's not bad, but it is, like, in the long run, we, especially, like, I don't want to, like, put, like, for me, I'm very much for abolishing the police and defunding them and getting them out of our communities. they're very harmful, not only to Black folks, but also to brown, non-Black immigrants, like Mexican immigrants. We have a lot of Mexican immigrants around here, and throughout the state, a lot of like central Mississippi police departments cooperate with immigration, and so these are all like tied to the same system.
I see.
They're the same, and as much harm as cops and the police do, I really don't think it's helpful to be their friends. I think it's better to hold them accountable and like make them hold themselves accountable and like have community hold them accountable.
I agree. Yeah, I get what you're saying, because if, you know, yeah, it's kind of like, it's a different kind of thing. You have certain, I mean, well, let me just go back. When you said in your town, it was mostly preachers that put this together. Well, if you're a Christian, you could understand what they're saying. I am not a Christian. I was once in my lifetime, but Christianity teaches you to do those things, to forgive and all that stuff. That's why I left Christianity, because when my Black ass don't want to forgive, I'm not forgiven. And when my Black ass feels like, you know, I forgave her, we cool. And that doesn't mean I got to be your friend. But there are times where I just didn't forgive, my body didn't release it, and therefore it's not released. I don't feel like I have to forgive. But when you're in an environment where it's Christian based, then you're probably going to get something like that. You know, like when Dylan Roof shot the Black people up in the church. All the good old Christian folks, 2 days later, I mean, I don't know the exact time frame, but it wasn't like 5 years later. It was quickly after that they had a press conference, and the Black folks are saying they forgive him. And just when the crazy ass white cop went into the Black man's house and shot him in his head while he was eating ice cream, saying she thought it was her apartment, which of course, are you on crack? When she got sentenced, the good old Black folks hugged her and said they forgave her. And so the list goes on. I'm guessing these people are all Christians, and they try to at least on the outside look like they're actually practicing it. So that could be why.
Yeah, I totally get that. And I totally get like his perspective. Like if the cops are on our side, then nobody has anything to worry about. But like
Did she freeze or am I freezing?
She froze.
OMG. Okay, jump in, guys, while we're waiting for Jessica to come back.
What I've been hearing in terms of people who have been against police officers kneeling and taking a stand. I actually unfollowed some people today. I never unfollow people. I had to just unfollow some folks today. About that is that where were you before George Floyd, when there were a litany of other deaths and people being murdered? And it seems like it's more of a symbolic action than one that is truly done in earnest. And I'm going to move really towards change after this. Like, you know, kneeling down this 5 minutes. Hey, a lot of them are like, oh, let me just do this to just shut them up and, you know, just let them, you know, make them think that, you know, we really are working towards. But best believe people are in the back collecting your information. And so that's one of the sentiments that I heard in terms of police. And then people said that, you know, how dare you participate in something when you have witnessed, I know in your career, injustices on Black bodies in the career, and you stand here as if you truly care as well.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened with the NFL and all that kind of stuff. Oh, y'all kneeling now, but not all, but a large majority of the NFL players either stayed silent and or were critical of including of course the executive levels and the owners of Colin Kaepernick. Now the owner has a comment online, and the players are kneeling. I'm like, you know, boy, bye. You know, you don't have nothing to say to us about all that. And then all these companies, you get all these emails from companies, your Geico and all these companies and YouTube, and, you know, they're sending these statements out in your college, and, you know, they stand behind us and we're doing these things. I'm like, really? So what I'm in the process of doing now is seeing who's really sincere, because even though you're saying, even like, you know, GoFundMe sent an email saying, you know, we feel this way and we're standing by and we're doing these things, and we're going to have a $500,000 fund to help those organizations who are doing yes, X, Y, and Z. So what I'm doing is all these companies coming forward now, we've been getting killed. Our black bodies didn't matter from the beginning of time till now. But we just have phones now. I'm looking at all these companies and see if you really care, to see who's at their executive level. Don't give me fish. Teach me how to fish. So when I went and looked up GoFundMe, I'll post it later, all of the upper level executives are white. So you don't care. So what I think a lot of these people are doing with the kneeling and the letters and they probably had an attorney write it or something like that. They're trying to do what I call a preemptive strike. They're trying to get in front of it before they look like a racist or something like that, or insensitive, because they know that black people spend more money than anybody in the economy of all time. Am I right?
You're right. And I also want to say, how much money has GoFundMe made off of collecting money from all of these police killings over the years? $500,000 is nothing.
Mm. Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in about that? About the protests. It could be about other protests too, not if you didn't do one directly, but what you saw, even if you saw on TV, or what you feel about the police presence and how they treated many people, like that black guy and the young black guy in Georgia getting tased in his car and dragged the girlfriend out. And he was like literally like body popping all over the place. It was just hard to watch. Anybody else, whether it was your personal experience at a protest you want to share or just other stuff you saw?
I went to the rally and protest on the 31st in Boston. So we started in the South End and got to Boston Commons. And that's just my involvement here. Also just like supporting my other frat brothers who are in Charlotte, North Carolina, who would have been on the call, Baruch. So he was in a protest, I believe, probably a couple days after in Charlotte. So it's just kind of all of us just trying to make our impact wherever we are, just to kind of make a statement and show our support. For me personally, Boston was quite an experience. It's not my first protest, but this is the first time I've ever been tear gassed twice and had fireworks shot at us. The way Boston had it set up, similar to you, Karina, how they came out with their shields. It seems to be there's a trend during the day. Everything's quite peaceful like it was. But as soon as night fell, it seemed as that's when they decided, okay, you got had enough. So they formed at the center of the street in a four-way intersection, and we put barricades on either side. And essentially we had two protests going on either side of them. Shortly after, they brought in, I guess you would call them SWAT. It wasn't them exactly, but same kind of uniform. And they began to say, this is now an unlawful protest, which I didn't know how that happened because we didn't change anything that we were doing before.
That's an oxymoron, that you can't have an unlawful protest because protests are lawful.
Exactly.
I mean, what the hell?
Yeah. So they repeated that over and over. And many of us had paid attention to a lot of the protests tactics that they use in China. So we then created a barricade ourselves to kind of make sure that we were not going to like let them drive through us, if you will, or something like that. So I guess they came prepared for that. And they had like launchers for their tear gas. So we were I would say we were 50 yards away from them, and they still shot them over. They still shot over the fireworks. And then even though police officers were still, they were doing their job. They were in the center. They didn't attack anybody. It seemed peaceful for the most part on my side. But the contrast...
The ones you said were not attacking you guys were not doing the tear gas?
Well, so they were shooting tear gas, but they didn't beat anybody.
Okay, so, we got to look at the definition of the word attack.
Yeah. So
you got to correct that. They were attacking you guys.
Essentially. So it's
not
it's
essentially. Not essentially. That is an attack.
Okay, it's almost like pick your poison though, because we weren't. I guess in the same instance, you kind of have to keep your space, which is understood. But in the same light, I was appreciative to the fact that they weren't I guess, kind of overstepping boundaries and being abusive towards protesters and running up in people's faces, as you've seen probably online and such. But the interesting issue that I faced was we did have some people who were beginning to get violent as our protesters, and were trying to beginning to loot. So one person had broken a glass to a business, and we actually stopped him and was like, "Yo, you gotta chill. We didn't come here for that." But ironically enough, somebody who wasn't even part of the protest ran from an off street through the crowd and decided to break a window of a nearby restaurant on a corner.
Oh! Look at this nigga, bro. Right. Oh! Look at this nigga, bro.
For some reason, I don't know what got over me, I decided to chase him.
Ooh, a track runner.
When I chased him, ironically enough, he was a white male, but he wasn't a protester.
Of course he wasn't.
Right.
He was he was some kind of provocateur or professional agitator.
From what we believe, he's a cop.
Undercover cop. There, a lot of them plain clothes cop. There, a lot of them are doing that. Yes.
Yes. So I stopped him. I chased him. They actually just put out the video, so I need to go post that.
Oh, give that video to her to get that. I kept saying, where's they got any videos, girl? That's a good plan. Okay.
So I run up on him. I was a bit agitated. I will say that to Elise. So I'm beginning to yell at him and saying, first of all, I said, well, why did you just do that? And he begins to immediately lie, say, no, I didn't. And this is how we started to really believe he was a cop, because someone who wasn't even nearby begins to come and say, oh, no, he didn't break a window. And I said, well, I just watched him because he ran in front of my face. So we chased him down. It almost got physical. Someone was ready to punch him in his face. There's now a crowd around him. I decided to tell him, I said, in your best interest, you should run now, because we may kill you. Because it is now about 15 people and everybody is ready to punch your face in, because what you are now doing is, and I'm screaming and yelling at him, you are now messing up the image of what we worked so hard to do in the first place.
Right.
You will be able to run off and you will be perfectly fine. But the image of what it will look like is as everybody of color just began to loot and destroy something, and we can't do anything positive. So that was my experience. And then, I was quite frustrated. I even was on the phone with my dad, kind of yelling and screaming. And he was watching it on the news. The other part about it is the news is kind of twisting things quite a bit.
Of course.
So they said they were live streaming the footage in Boston, and they said that a car flipped and turned on fire, when that actually wasn't the case at all. There wasn't even a car near us for us to do anything. And my dad's like, yeah, he's like, no, you guys just set a car on fire. I was like, nope, I'm in Boston Commons. I also sent you my location. Nothing is going on. Literally, we're just yelling behind a barricade at cops 50 yards away that's holding a circle. And it was a real eye-opener to really see like how easy it is to just twist an image, and how representation can be turned, and really and truly how hard people were working to try to make a difference, and someone else could just come in and take it all away. And yeah, that was just my experience.
Perspective of educate folks on pre-Columbian culture, especially Mississippi pre-Columbian cultures. And like what Mikel was saying, like the official record is like showing something completely different than what our folks are saying. And it just makes me think of like how history books have like propaganda and inaccurate histories. And folks always ask why indigenous people don't preserve their history
Right.
when their history is already preserved in oral traditions. And so, like, that just makes me so angry that the news is doing that, because that's what people are going to believe. They're not going to believe us. They're not going to believe our oral stories. They're going to believe what the news publishes.
Right, because that's the narrative that the media has out there. Because this social media thing has been a good and bad thing, a blessing and a curse. So we have at our fingertips where we don't have to wait for, like in my time, you only have 3 networks to watch and the TV goes off at 12 o'clock at night and you see bar tones. Now we have, news all the time, information all the time, but it could be bad information that people are putting out. It could be propaganda that people are putting out if you don't vet it and you don't do the research. But a lot of people are not going to do the research. However, it's a little better still than when I was coming up, because it was like, to do research, you have to get out of your house, go to the library, go on the microfiche. So you really had to make a bigger effort to do research. So I'm guessing that there's going to always be that faction who's going to be able to hide or lie or bolster or stretch information. But at least now we have independent publications and independent news outlets that we can look at to weigh against each other. So to your point, yes, it's a problem. Anybody else want to share about, what they've seen in the protests and what they think, or, their involvement directly, even if it's in the planning behind the scenes, or the question of, is there a good way or bad way to protest? That's a big discussion in the Black community. And we really ain't agreeing on that. So.
The only thing I'd like to speak towards is the diversity. Of course, you will catch when you see live images on the news or Facebook or, just social media in general, unless you're, Facebook friend that is white or Hispanic personally post their picture, showing that they were there. But being in an actual large crowd and actually being able to weigh out the amount of diversity, it's so much larger than the media portrays. And as much as I knew there were a lot of African Americans out there, I really felt like there was a lot more of everyone else. And so it was very amazing to see the diversity. Because the ratio, I would be standing beside just as many Black people as I would biracial, as I would Hispanic and white in just, within a small amount of square feet. So the diversity and, even the signs, reading people's signs. I remembered a white girl, her sign said white silence is white violence. So it's like, wow, to really see it. It's not a meme, or it's not, snipped from a protest 5 years ago, right in front of you. It's like, wow. And Mikel was talking about imposters, kind of really looking around, because, while you're there, you're marching, you're, tunnel vision. I was very much wise in looking to my left and my right, looking around the corner, or for sketchy body language and stuff like that, and conversations and keywords. You never know if there's anybody who wants to be an instigator for, starting a riot. So even the demeanor of those people, it was very slim to none that I had saw anything of a sketchy nature. So they were really serious. They were really serious. Of every color, everybody was really serious about being out there and being like, look, we need change, no justice, no peace. And people, even though there were crowd leaders, other people took the initiative to lead chants. And, it wasn't just us leading chants, so it was just like, wow.
Well,
I feel like that's kind of like part of like this grander media kind of narrative. It feels like protesters has, like, the word protesters has become a word that white folks can use to be covertly racist. because they're like the protesters burning and destroying things, and like people have this idea that it's just black folks, and they think that I don't know, I feel like it's just very like kind of like covert racism, because they're like, just because of the language they use, but they don't realize that it's like everyone is rising up, and yeah, it's
Well,
covert
I think that's, I mean, I like to make corrections. You know, white people do not think that, because they have eyes. They see that it's lots of people of different races. They do see with their eyes. So they do not think that. They did not think that when they saw the Women's March with 5 million people down in Washington doing a protest for the Women's March when Donald Trump got elected. So when it's protesters and it's a sea of white women, they didn't think that the word protest was negative then. So for you to even take that, have that as a part of your, like, well, is this going on? This is what they want. They want you to think, oh my God, the protesters. No, they think, if a person thinks that they were racist before the protest, they're racist during the protest, and they're racist after the protest. Because nothing about a person can make them a racist if they're not, particularly not words. The word protest actually has a meaning, and it's not a negative meaning. But to your point, part of that is how they do that with many words, not just words like protest. When we were taking crack in the 80s, they called us crackheads and crack babies. Now that white folks are addicted to heroin, they say opioid addiction. So they take words that all have actual meanings and try to place on those words the dog whistling of the word, or the covert dog whistling. But it really isn't. It's overt, isn't it? Because if I'm watching a video and I'm seeing what you guys are saying to me, which I've seen plenty of them, where you have a sea of all kinds of people, nothing made me think when I heard the news say the protesters were doing things. I'm looking to see, well, who did it? I'm not thinking, oh, the black folks again. I'm thinking, who did it? Because I'm just looking for the person who got caught and who did it. So that's just kind of like, you know, food for thought. But anyway, you know, people, let's talk about planning. People, this is another spin, like
But you know what? I have to interject, Lisa, and say that what I've been seeing on a lot of like particularly, and not even just white people, even black people who are against the demonstrations, there's an implication, because they're tearing up their community, they're so I would also have to push back on that and say that, but I get what you're saying is that they take these words and even though the words have a meaning, and even though they know that there is a diverse people that are demonstrating, the way in which it is used, it is appropriated in a way in which it signifies something else that is very racialized, which is what I think Jessica was saying as well.
A lot better way to say it. Yeah, that's what I meant. You said it in a way better way.
No, it's just, I was just throwing out the thought. No, it's fine. I agree with saying things different, the same thing different ways. Yes, I agree 1,010%.
And that's because they can't say nigger publicly. Exactly. I mean, that's really what it is. No, it's like, I can't say nigger, so this is what I'm gonna do.
Well, it reminds me of, let me do an analogy. And I correct them now. When you hear a white person, you never hear a white person say, "Oh, you're playing the white card." They don't say that, right? Or they don't say to anybody other than blacks. They always say to blacks, "You're playing the race card," and nobody black ever challenges the white person, because don't we have different races? So then I started to think, let me challenge that white person. So I say to the white person, "So what race are you referring to?" Then they never respond, because that's code for nigger. Because the word race they didn't say what race, right? And I never hear them say to whites, "Oh, you're playing the race card." So that is something that they actually have us on autopilot, thinking that they mean black. Challenge the white person the next time, when they if not even talking to you, when they say, "Oh, that person was playing the race card," say, "What race are you referring to?" And they're going to be silent, because they know if they're going to say black right there, it's going to be a bomb dropping. So they do know. I'm just saying that they do know. That's all. But I agree with you with all the rest of it, but they do know what they're seeing. That's the comfort level of them being able to hide behind, but I don't understand and I don't see that, but you do know and you do see. Because, for example, Jane Elliott, which I like. Sometimes I'm a little, I don't agree with everything she does, but she did, it's an old video from 1990 or 80, I forgot when she did the video, where she was talking to a sea of white people at some place, big audience. Looks like it was maybe 2,000 people or so, about race and all that. She's big on race, white lady. And so she said all kinds of stuff. And then at one point she said, so can I please have everybody in the audience who identifies as white, I'm paraphrasing, please stand up if you are interested in being treated the exact same way that Black people are treated in this country. Please stand up. She said, wait, did y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Shake your head. Yeah. Let me ask it again. And she asked the question again. Not one white person stood up. So you do know you have white privilege. So you do know what it is. You're telling us you don't, so you don't have to do anything about it. You do know. Oh, you do know. That's all I'm trying to say. So what they want us to think is that they don't know, or that they don't understand, or I'm confused. No, you're not. Words aren't confusing you. Images aren't confusing you. None of that's confusing you. Because you know how you see even videos. Every time there's a video, they go, but we don't know what happened before that. You ever see that? Like the Rodney King syndrome? Rodney King gets beat the hell up and broke the hell up, and they just couldn't deal with what was in the video. They had to tell us, but we don't know what happened before the video, but the topic is the video. And that still happens today. But we don't know what happened before the video. In fact, that white lady, Amy Cooper, who called the cops on the Black guy as the Black guy was shooting her ass, and he said, call the cops. And she's still doing it. I'm going to call the cops. And she's in the camera. And I'm going to tell them, you're trying to hurt me, because you know what she planned on doing? Luckily, the cops, when the cops got there, they both were gone. But she was planning on saying, but before the video, he did this. That was her plan. Because she couldn't say what was in the video was what happened, because the cop's going to see that didn't happen. She's going to lie and make up something that happened before the video, because that's what the white eyes love to see. Not all white eyes. The racist ones. Okay, just throwing it out there. So let's talk about, this debate about, planning and all this. So planning protests, I don't know, did you guys plan? Do you think, because this narrative that, there's no planning, it's just happening all over the place, nilly-willy. And then, protests don't work, and why are we doing it anyway? It didn't work when Martin Luther King did it. It didn't work last time. And, Martin Luther King did it peacefully, but he still got shot in the head and killed. Why are you guys looting? Like, all of these distractions. So what do you feel about protests altogether in the planning of, and in the efficacy of, the effectiveness of them? I would love to hear some young folks' point of view, because I've been around 56 years.
Personally, as far as it goes with protests, at this point in time, whatever happens, happens.
Okay.
It was a peaceful protest when Kaepernick was kneeling. It was a peaceful protest when we were resharing things on Facebook. It was a peaceful protest when we tried to have the conversation at work, when somebody inevitably brought it up and tried to say, well, we don't know what happened before. Those were all peaceful protests, but every single time. And I recently had a conversation with one of the teammates, and they said, oh, well, that wasn't the right time for him to kneel. So immediately my question was, so you tell me, when is it okay for us to do something? Since you clearly set the timeline and the agenda and conduct about how we should do something. And usually there is no answer to that question. So with that being said, anyone who's upset, oh, they're looting, to be honest with you, oh, well, like all those companies are insured, so they'll be fine.
Boom,
the additional point to it is, violence is what happens when people are angry. How do you expect me how do you expect a people? I'm only 28. I've seen more than enough to make me want to flip shit. So I could only imagine people that were there before me, or the kids that are in my generation now that's seeing more than enough. And then on top of that, everyone has a video camera. Everyone is attached to social media. It's not like they have to wait for a paper to come out for them to see it. As soon as it happens, everybody's seeing it immediately. And it's not going away. You can't even shield your child from seeing this stuff because it's posted everywhere.
Right.
So you literally have people that are suffering from PTSD every single moment of the day. What do you expect them to do? Mm-hmm. It's almost at the point is like, if a child's having a fit and they're having a terrible day, can I really tell this child, no, you don't need to act that way, when part of the reason why this child is having a fit is because I did these things ahead of time? Mm-hmm.
And what and to your analogy real quick, and don't forget your point, you know, long are gone the times when a parent can say, because I told you so, because people expecting that shit. You have to create an environment where I am inspired to respect you. Your title's not going to do it. Just because your title's called mom or dad. So this is what they feel, because I'm the big bad, whatever. So to your point, I'm throwing it in the mix, which the example as, you know, children do. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's perfect. And to be honest with you, as far as planning goes, I would say there were some specific leaders that you could clearly see for the protest. And I mean, the same way that you know, social media has desensitized us and allowed us to see things we didn't need to see. I was allowed to see that, hey, we're having a protest at 5 o'clock tomorrow, be there or be square. So boom, that was quick. And then to see, I mean, it was a sea of people.
Oh, wow.
It was huge. And we marched for at least, 5 miles to the center of Boston. Wow. And to roll up that deep with everybody, and then for it to still be like, it was a cultural moment. Like people were blasting Chief Keef on the way there. As soon as the cops started acting up, somebody played
Fuck the Police by
yes, someone definitely did play that, but then someone also played who just
that's one of my dudes. That's my time.
Kendrick Lamar.
So like, it's really like we had like 6 guys with speakers on their backs blasting music and keeping
from the 80s, like back like in the 80s.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, like, the boom box was like in the 80s.
Yes, it was a beautiful moment. Just to see, like everybody was just with it. But honestly, like I understand. When we're at this point in time, especially like dealing with other white people who don't get it, it's and some people may disagree with me, but the yelling and the screaming, they're not going to hear us when it comes to some points. And in the same instance that you used and said, oh, how they said, oh, protesters is basically the covert word of them trying to say niggas, is also, it's working against us in the same way, because the light that they're saying, the reason why I was so upset that the guy broke the window is because they're using that against us. So as soon as we go to speak this message, they're not even paying attention to the message. It's just they're looting and tearing shit up. And they're not even hearing the part of, no, this would have never happened if y'all just arrest all 4 people off rip. This wasn't even necessary.
But they were helping to push that. They were
exactly. Exactly. And it's this level of frustration, and it hurts to see when I'm looking at my friends yelling at a cop saying, you guys are killing people. You are taking lives, and you are sitting there comfortably about this. But in the same light, I know he's not listening, because all he sees is another angry black person.
No, let me just jump in and twist and do a little turn. Then we're going to talk about, he doesn't see another angry black person, right? Because they kill us before we're yelling. So was George an angry black person that the cops saw? He still murdered him anyway.
But the reason that they thought he was violent is because he wasn't angry.
No, they didn't think that. Stop. That's the narrative they want us to think. The cop never thought that.
So why did he use excessive force?
Okay, now we have a good question. I'm not going to say anything. Y'all, take it away. I'll just jump in when I feel like it. I want to hear that. Good, real good question, young man. Love it. We get ready to dissect this stuff. Okay.
You like to stir things up, I can tell, and I'm here for it in the long run. Yes, ma'am. But I'll go to the original question and drive it home to what we were just at. But first of all, protesting is effective. Is it the ultimate solution? No, because it's not the only solution. However, it is effective because what happens is it puts people on radar. It puts people at the edge of their seat. Oh no, they're outside, they're walking, what's gonna happen? Alert the police. Because when the streets are clear, there's nothing to really worry about but your usual, crime and maybe usual calls here and there. But when a multitude of people are walking the streets, you don't know everybody's intentions. It's easy to subdue one or two people out lingering on the sidewalk, but, thousands and thousands of people, everyone's at the edge of their seats. Everyone's kind of watching and looking and, trying to get a grasp of what's going on. So it gets people's attention. What's going to happen? What are they going to do? Let's be on guard. Let's be on call. And then it's not like we were all out there with a list of demands, but they know what we want. You know what I'm saying? So I always wonder, I know, but it brings the question, without media attention and the pressure it puts on decision makers, where would we be? Where would George Floyd be? Where would his family be if they weren't recording, or if what they posted, but it didn't go viral, or it got deleted, or no one was there at all? Where would we be? Because there's other people who are like George Floyd who didn't get the media attention. That's the difference between the justice they got and the justice that we're trying to get now. And as far as planning, for me personally, I use a quote I learned from being a member of the NAACP, Fired Up, Ready to Go. So I stay fired up, ready to go. I got a Black Power playlist. I really admire the Black Panther Party. So I have a signature pair of black boots. I put them on with my black pants and my black shirt that said I can't breathe. And I know I was wearing that shirt whenever I wanted, but I bought it initially. Actually, this wasn't a new shirt. I got it after Eric Garner passed away, and those were his last words. So to put it on again, not just because it's a shirt I have, but this time it's another man's last words, it was like, unfortunately, I didn't have a beret at the time to put on. I was going to have the whole nine. But I, drove to my friend's house. I played my playlist. And so my mindset.
What's on that playlist, girl? What's on that playlist? Give me a couple of playlists.
On my Apple Music.
Let me get a couple of bars. Okay.
Okay. I entitled my baby daddy. You said what?
It better be some LL Cool J because that's my baby daddy.
Actually, I didn't have him up here. It was a quick list I put together, but I have Freedom, Beyonce featuring Kendrick. Oh, okay. I have Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, James Brown, DNA, King Kunta, All Right by Kendrick. I had Panther Power, Tupac, Me and Just Keep Your Head Up, My Vote Don't Count by Yellow Pain, a whole lot of Solange, Affinity by Rhapsody, Fight the Power by Public Enemy, and I was definitely feeling like Radio Raheem at that point.
Raheem, yeah, he died.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think he had a heart attack. Yeah,
it was even more symbolic because Spike Lee put that imagery of police brutality in his movie when it happened to Radio Raheem, the character. Yeah. So playing that song while going to this, protest was just very reminiscent. Or whatever. But planning, the friend that invited me, older male, okay, cool. I have a strong older male with me. I'll be my brother's keeper. He'll be his sister's keeper. We'll stay in close proximity. When we kind of got a feeling of the crowd, we're like, okay, I think we should stay within the crowd, but closest to the sidewalk, stay together, especially after we had to run from the tear gas. Okay, my ankle's injured. Let's stay closest to the side so that we can, get out of the way. So you go into it thinking about covering yourself or watching your surroundings and being vigilant, and kind of seeing how things shift as they go and knowing when to leave or knowing when to change positions. Because after a while, we started to see the crowd. Well, not really the crowd, but the police get agitated. So, you go into it being observant the entire time. And to the question that you had about...
I like to elevate people's thinking. The police were not agitated. Remember, the police had artillery, bullets, bulletproof vests. They had hats. They had protective gear. They had large numbers. Y'all were peaceful. They were not agitated.
I see your perspective because I'm thinking in the mind frame of it was set. Oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, then you jump in. I want to start changing what we're saying. We're already sentencing ourselves. We're actually attaching. We're accusing ourselves of something, saying that we're guilty of this thing. We accused ourselves of something and sentenced ourselves. We are actually building in a narrative for them without them having to do it themselves. They were not agitated because you didn't agitate. It was peaceful, you said. They were not scared of you because they had gear and bullets after bullets after bullets. So they were something, but they weren't agitated. What they were, who the hell do you think you are? So they wanted you all to be agitated. So go. If we don't agree, that's fine.
Yeah, what I was going to say in response to that, and I even see more of your perspective. So you're right to change that narrative, because my thinking was, when we started to observe, it was also based on time, because the way the announcement was put out that the protest should commence around 7 o'clock. So being that 7 p.m. had, and I guess the series of events is why I use the evidence to say agitated, but I see what you mean. The time was coming around, and around that same time, we saw the movements of the police change. So as far as how they huddled in and started getting their walkies, you see them talking and moving, just so happened to be 7 o'clock. So we're like, you know what? Okay, they must be wanting to clear the streets. They must be, nobody's trying to clear the street. Therefore, me thinking initially they were getting agitated. But, if we know 7 o'clock, then they come planned and prepared to do what they want to do and when they want to do it. So
was there a curfew there too, like they did in New York?
I'm not sure if they had a curfew in Raleigh. If I'm not mistaken, that night I got home and heard that they enforced one that night. Okay. Or they did the next day. But to my understanding, I don't think that they did. But for Goldsboro, we actually did, and that our curfew was actually initiated after only rumors, which kind of upset some people, because why are you giving us a curfew if we've had no instances of violence? But some saw where the mayor was coming from. Well, we have rumors, so just in case. And some said having a curfew would just rub people the wrong way to get agitated to do it anyway. But I don't remember. What was the point that you were making earlier that you were saying you wanted more dialogue on? Because I was trying to think that I hit the whole.
No, that's okay. Go ahead. You can say what you had to say.
Oh, no, that was all, but it's just as far as planning, if it's not your protest, you go into it with the right mind and heart. And if you're going with people, even though there's a million people out there, you got to worry about you and your people. But if you're organizing and you're planning, you definitely need to know. You definitely just need to know what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're going to call if something goes left, having your P's and Q's and orders, because it's not in order, because it's not enough just to say, hey, we're meeting downtown at 7 o'clock, okay, to do what, for how long, going where, with who, until when, and what if. So who's our backup, who's our support? If something does happen, who do we declare the leader of this so that we can go to the source? Who is the source? If not, who would the blame be put on? So that's important for people to remember. As I see people wanting to take initiative to, I want to go protest. I want to do this and do that. Let's go do it with no strategy. I think that's been my biggest pet peeve throughout this, is seeing criticism without strategy. So I had made the point, put your perspective into a plan and your opinion into organization. Otherwise, what's the point? So have a strategy. Don't just say this is what we should do. Have a strategy. So
I want to ask you all too. I can start with you, Jessica, in terms of protesting again. I have a couple more questions, then we'll move on to some other stuff related, like organizing. I'm just kind of looking around. So in terms of protesting, do you feel like the protesting was impactful to for the Attorney General to have gotten those indictments for the 3 cops who had not even been fired for a while, and now they're fired and indicted, as well as the officer who killed George, Derek Chauvin? He took his 3rd-degree murder charge and upgraded it to 2nd degree. Do you think that the protest, I don't know if you can answer, but we'll start with Jessica, had an impact and it put the pressure on for that to happen?
You know, a well-organized protest is really effective. Like having demands and having a leader or multiple leaders, I think is effective. So I think the protest did push the AG to kind of like relook at things and file more charges. In Mississippi, we have a case back from 2016 that our Attorney General just dropped all the charges for. A cop killed a guy named Ricky Ball, and he the charges were dropped on that case. And so today we had a protest in Jackson at the Capitol, specifically for that case, specific to Mississippi. So who knows? Hopefully, I think the protest was pretty well planned. It was by an organization, a regional organization with Mississippi leaders, but I hope it was effective. I know the guy's family tried to give our governor demands, just like in a letter, and our governor didn't even come outside. He sent a black representative for him. But I've heard a lot from my black organizer friends and some of their grievances with protests that were just thrown together. Everyone, like even me in Mississippi, small town, everyone feels acted to do something, or everyone feels prompted to do something just because of how egregious George Floyd's murder was. And a lot of folks, you know, they're like, let's go protest, like, let's just get out there, put the word out. But the thing is that if you just throw something together and have a bunch of folks show up and there's a cop presence because small town rumors get around, you're putting Black lives at risk because increased police presence. And I think you might agree with me on this one. The statistics say Black folks are more harmed by police presence, or by the police, than pretty much everyone else. So if you're just throwing something together and inviting everyone and not having any kind of organization or even just a plan, then you're putting Black lives at risk.
Okay.
And also I want to speak on the point about youth organizers. I come from a background of organizing in the Southeast. I think my internet's being weird again, but I worked within a coalition of queer organizers, and we, through GSA Network Southeast, we started, well, I wasn't a founding member, I just helped out a camp called Queer Youth Leading the South. And so through my experiences there, I know how valuable youth voices are and how powerful they are. And the group of youth here in Cleveland and in the Delta that wanted to come protest, during our planning, it was all what do you guys want to do? What do y'all want to do? And how can we support and how can we make this happen? And so, a lot of the protests in Mississippi, I think we have one tomorrow, is youth-led, and not just youth, Black youth-led. And so I just think it's incredible. And they're very, the one tomorrow is very well planned. They even considered people with mobility issues. They have a tent, a space set out so that people of all ability can come and show up. So these youth-led protests are amazing, and they're just they deserve support.
So I wanted to throw out to, because we talked about narrative a lot, you know, so I want to throw this out to Mikel. So in terms of narrative, how can the media portrayals of recent protests change to better represent the call for change by the protesters? Do you have any ideas? What do you think? Do you give a damn?
I think it would start with actual representation of what's actually happening. Getting on the ground. Why not go be part of the protest? I think that would probably be the best way for you to actually see what's going on. I know I do see a few of the interviews that they do have, and I think it's a start. But I think following up with that, and then also I guess being completely honest with what's actually happening, being able to really elaborate on who's doing what and not trying to cut the image to what actually looks good or clickbait, which is what seems to be the issue at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll give it, this next question is going to go to you, Karina. I'll talk about COVID real quick. So I'll ask you, Karina. So I'm not at all the protests, but we are in the moment of COVID-19, coronavirus-19, the coronavirus pandemic. So talk about, do you think that the protesting, the lack of social distancing, many times not wearing masks, do you think we're already, Black people and brown people are already have the highest death rates when they get the virus? Do you think that this is going to play into that, or it was just a necessary thing? It was an essential thing to do, even though we have COVID. And how can we maybe do it safely, if you have any ideas, Karina?
I think that it was a very necessary and essential thing to do. And I think that it was more so of a heart pull. Like, we already have been quarantined. We've been in the house. We had to be in the house for Ahmaud Arbery. We had to be in the house for Breonna Taylor. And this time we didn't want to be in the house because we already didn't want to be in the house. And so, we showed up with our masks and, we tried to keep them on. I myself, especially trying to lead chants and help with direction, it just was hard to keep it on. We did not social distance. I mean, every now and then somebody passed around some hand sanitizer, but the only pandemic that I was interested in responding to was the pandemic of institutionalized and systematic racism and police brutality. Now, we do have to be vigilant. We do have to continue to abide by the guidelines that we have set. But not allowing it to be a distraction. So I would encourage people to continue to wear a mask, wash your hands, take a bath, take a hand sanitizer with you, Lysol, don't be nasty, wash your hands. Don't cough without covering your mouth and stuff like that. But also to take care of yourself, because like I said, this fighting, this societal pandemic is important. So once you're at home, covering your P's and Q's with your diet, and I'm real big on holistic health. So know what you can put in your body to boost your immune system. So it's all, it's all a matter of taking the initiative. You should never wait till you feel funny in your throat. You should never wait till you have an ache to take some black seed oil or drink some chamomile tea. I'm all into herbs and everything like that. Get into it, because it's important to protect your mind, protect your mental space. So unplug if you have to, because it can be everything that's going on can be very damaging to the mental health. And also, build your defenses emotionally as well as physically. And hopefully this, pandemic, both of them will be over soon, but more particularly COVID, because I know, racism is a little bit more of a systematic issue. So, but I want people to stay vigilant and don't allow the fear to keep them inside. However, be wise. Some people didn't protest just simply the fact of I wanted to make sure I came home to my children. So to each their own. And I don't have any, feelings toward people who don't want to protest unless their intentions are counterproductive. So.
Yeah, you answered another question I was going to ask about physically and mentally taking care of yourself. So you put that all in one. I want to ask a question of Jessica, and then I'll come and ask you another question about the police to Mikel. So Jessica, how can local communities better support protesters? And this advice can be used whether you're in your town or something you can suggest that would work across the board in a general sense. So what are your suggestions? Do you have any? Did you give it any thought?
There's quite a few guides that are going around on how to participate in these protests without being on the front lines. And so, like, for us, a lot of folks contributed money so that we could buy water because since I can't be on the front lines, I gave out free water. And people contributed ice and coolers. And we had some folks give us masks and hand sanitizer.
Nice.
Yeah, there are lots of ways to participate in these protests, even if you can't be on the front lines.
That's great. So knowing the history of police in the United States, which pretty much hasn't changed, starting off as those who were slave catchers, back in the day. Then it evolved into those who enforced like black codes and Jim Crow laws. What are your thoughts on law enforcement as it stands today? And if it's a system that you think can really be fixed or even needed at this point? Because I know that Jessica mentioned a little bit that she feels like we should just give it all together. What are your thoughts? Can it be fixed? Seeing that it has a history of not changing much, do you think there's hope that it can be fixed, or do you think it should just be abolished altogether?
I think that's a really good question. Can you abolish the police? Me personally, I don't know if you can completely abolish a force like that. That's almost ingrained within our institution. But in the same light, it's very hard to restructure and shape that and retrain all of that in itself. I mean, that's a tough one. I don't know if you could, just because you have the dynamic of those cops who are in the street and get spoiled from the job and be able to get this really dark image of what they think people are, and they no longer can have feelings. So then you get to see instances like this where police officers are so overly aggressive for no reason. But then in the same light, you do have those that are essentially good, but then you also have the underlying image of it is essentially a big boys club where everybody's going to keep everybody's back. So it's almost like maybe we should get rid of it. But right? But is that feasible? Because then who will police, if you will? Can we institute someone to police? And I guess that comes into play with bringing more black faces in. But as you can see with the incident that happened in Atlanta, there were black officers involved as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back into my other point is, and me being a social worker and a therapist, I see it a lot when I have older social workers who are constantly seeing terrible things and having to deal with stereotypical images. They begin to just say, okay, this is just a blanket statement of how these people are. And they begin to forget that at the end of the day, that's a human being. So what can we, I think the additional question comes in is what can we do to officers to, I guess, make them human again? I think a lot of them are becoming robotic in their response to deal with situations. And I think that kind of goes with how we had this little back and forth of, well, why did he use excessive force? It's probably due to the fact that he feels this is just my automatic response because I've been in so many situations where this was the case and they always have a gun. So I'm just going to assume he has a gun, or I'm going to assume he's up to no good when that may not be the case at all. So I don't know if I answered your question at all.
No, I mean it's just, you know, it's a dialogue. This is a, you know, a dialogue. Yeah. So no, this is cool because it's very difficult because there's no you know, one thing to fix everything. But I love the answer, and it surely will leave us with, you know, food for thought, if you will, as the old folks say. I'm going to go to, I have two more questions. I'm going to go to Karina, then the last one will be Jessica. Karina, can you tell us what kinds of conversations are you having with your family and friends who may not take these issues seriously or understand them, or that you need to have with family and friends who you feel like, or coworkers or people that you know who may not take these issues seriously? When I say these issues, it could be the issues of needing to protest, issues of police brutality, issues of racism and systematic racism, the issues that surround all of this going up.
Well, me personally, a lot of people know me now, not just as Karina, but Rena Speaks, and she's one heck of a controversial person. And so I have those controversial conversations that need to be had. Because the issue isn't so much silence, it's when you say what you say, you're not saying enough. And that's another part of the problem. Sometimes, yeah, be politically correct, but sometimes you just need to be correct. And I feel as though if we take out the time to, first of all, know our stance, be clear about what our stance is, so that we can vocalize it and vocalize it correctly, then that gets us into better dialogues, better conversations, and also knowing when to put your emotions where. A lot of people, you know, I used to be the one who would go head to head in comment sections and get so mad I gotta turn off my phone and it gets under my skin. Now to a point to where I can scroll by and know when to let someone be ignorant and know when to educate, because I do believe you should always educate first. You should never leave someone ignorant intentionally. Some people, you have to protect your energy, and so you don't want to give when you know it's not going to be received. So I guess that's just more so a wisdom thing on that level, but we need to have those conversations. We need to have those disputes. Sometimes we need to have those disagreements to see where the people around you stand, so you know who's in your camp and who's in your tribe and your village, so that when you're looking for that support, you'll know who to go to. But my main goal is to provoke thought. So I always hope to change perspectives, or to more so raise people's level of thinking. Because you can be correct in your thinking, but you can always think higher. So we should never stop speaking. We should never stop speaking up. And sometimes even I struggle with it. I know I can't talk to it with these people, or I know my family might not understand it or understand what I'm saying, but don't ever be backed into a corner. So use all your platforms, social media, in person, use every platform, and use it in a creative way as well, because sometimes it can help to ease the message out when you do it in a way that's personal to you. Sometimes, because I'm a poet, poetry helps me ease it out in a way that's not taxing to my energy, because that's my self-expression, and it ignites me positively. So me giving that out doesn't drain my energy. So if it's a song, if it's a dance, if it's, you know, musicianship, or just artistically, if that can help you better exert your energy so that you can express what you feel, because not everybody can just plainly say it, then do that. So with that being said, that's across the board. That leaves no excuse for silence. Okay.
And the last question will go to Jessica. Hopefully this one isn't hard. I wanted to know from you, although this groundswell sparked based on the last straw, which was, I guess, COVID, you know, juxtaposed against, you know, George Floyd's murder, but it was bigger than that. We were marching for more than that. So what long-term impact do you think this, we'll call it revolution, is going to have in shifting the status quo being racism, the status quo being, you know, poverty, you know, the status quo meaning, you know, them versus us. You know, what does that mean to you? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to work? Do you think it's going to shift? Jessica?
I'm hoping it will. I feel like people are listening, and COVID-19, I feel like COVID-19 disabled the economy. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when these protests started to happen, like, folks were already, like, laid off work. They were already working from home and stuff like that. So it made it a lot easier for people to show up, because organizing in the Delta, you have folks that work all day. And so the hardest part is, like, finding time to show up. I know I'm hoping that these protests will have long-term effects, as in defunding the police, de-arming the police, and having communities police themselves, and not necessarily have folks that don't look like them and folks that have this militaristic mindset serving and protecting. I know Minneapolis, I think it was like their school district, they dropped the contract with the Minneapolis PD, and one of the city council persons from that city actually spoke to the media and said, we're considering defunding the police. And I believe in LA, their police budget was cut by a considerable amount. And I saw also in Oregon, I think it was like Portland, they were also like cutting a budget. And so you look at the kind of like juxtaposition between COVID and having nurses and doctors wearing garbage bags, and then you look at the police response to these protests and they look like they're ready for battle in Iraq. Like, there's something wrong with that. Like, there's literally something wrong with this foundation that we live in, where the people that are supposed to save our lives can't afford to protect themselves, but then the people that are protecting property, they're full out geared in everything they need. So I hope this does bring long-term change. We need this change. Like, I really, really hope that. And I like that a lot of these cities are cutting budgets, because that money can go into our communities. Like, we don't need to pay people to oppress us. We need that money for our communities, for healthcare, for schools, for after-school programs, to help single parents. Like, there's a lot that we need, and police isn't one of them. So I hope that's long-term change. We can take the steps, little steps if they want, but eventually the abolishment of the police force, I feel like we're moving towards that.
You know, I think that I'll just end it by saying, I think that some of these concepts, the dialogue, the discourse, the conversation, it seems kind of like for naught, as they say, but that is what we thought back in the 1960s and in Jim Crow and in slavery. We thought we would never get to this point. Many of those folks are not here anymore, and some got lucky to live long enough to see a Black president and going forward. So I think it starts with these steps, and hopefully by the time, you know, I'm 85, some of these things will be abolished. So we'll all do a final thought. That was my final thought. So each one of you do a closing thought. You know, if you want to share your social media or your last thought, 30 seconds, so that that's a lasting impression folks have of you. And we'll get out of here and party by ourselves in the house on Friday night. We can start with, we'll go the other way. Mikel? And then go back down the line. Mikel, Karina, and then Jessica.
Gotcha. I guess closing, I want to say we've made some noise. Some people have heard us. Some people may not understand. I think the next goal is to stay focused and continue to push our point all the way through, and not like similar to what Karina said, we need to focalize our power, decide this is what we're going to do, let's do it, and let's finish this, and let's make this statement known. Let's put back our leaders that we used to have, and get a staple on what we need as a community, so we can have something that's lasting and not just for the moment of the social media hype of 15 minutes of fame. With that said, I just want to change. I think that's the best thing I can say at this point in time.
Once again, let's see. Wow, a lot has been said. Be proactive beyond the hype. Be about that life at all times. Be your brother's keeper at all times. Be your sister's keeper at all times. Hold yourself accountable and hold other people accountable at all times. Keep your intentions pure and be intentional when you do things. Do not forget self-care, and be vigilant. And a lot of people have definitely made it a point to refer to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and even discussing which one are you. But who are you? Malcolm's gone. Martin's gone. Huey's gone. Rosa's gone. Marcus Garvey is gone. Who are today's leaders? And if they ask that, whose names would they call for today? So if you cannot be that, then encourage someone else who you feel could lead and support them all the way. And as always, whenever I get on a platform, I always say, know thyself, love thyself, be thyself. But first you must know thyself in order to love thyself, because you can't love what you don't know in order to be.
Last but not least, Jessica, what are your 30 seconds, your final thoughts in 30 seconds?
My final thoughts are to continue this work and plan like actual steps towards showing up for Black folks, and don't be performative. When you go to these protests, protect Black lives, protect Black trans lives. Iana Dior was attacked in the Minneapolis raids, or not raids, riot protests. If you're interested in finding a political home that's pro-queer, pro-Black, and you're in the South, we're also pro-poor, pro-immigrant. Search for Southerners on New Ground. This organization is my political home, and yeah, just show up and don't be performative. You do.
Okay. Well, my last thoughts are, I thank all of you young people, honestly, and I'm not saying this to be coy. You know, a lot of things are said about young people. Oh, they don't care, and all they want to do is be on social media, and they want to do stuff for clickbait. You know, you guys really do care, and you showed up and showed out. So I want to say, you keep going, and you keep pushing, and you keep advocating, and you keep inspiring, and you keep aspiring, so that others can catch on. It'll catch like wildfire. And you are the leaders of tomorrow. There are leaders in you. There's Angela Davis's, you know, give or take, Malcolm X's, and whatever your names are going to be in the history books, because we're on the other side of retirement, and we're going to be convalescing. Y'all got to take this mantle and keep that thing moving, like you see the Olympic guy that just carries the torch from one nation to the next. So I thank you for all of the work you guys have been doing.